Hi, my name is Jacob Ellerbrook, and we'll be discussing what the experience is like to be an LGBTQ member here in Lubbock, but more specifically, what it's like to be coming out here in Lubbock, Texas, or to be coming to Lubbock, Texas, having lived in other places as an LGBTQ member. We'll see what I have to say and what I have learned so far during this experience. So, to get started, I knew I needed to ask someone about this topic. I mean, it's Lubbock, Texas. You wouldn't think there would be really anyone to ask this question. I mean, it is a primarily red county, and Texas, and this part of Texas being a very red and kind of Bible thumping area, and so I knew I had to ask people I knew, and people I knew who came from different backgrounds than I. So I first started with asking a friend of mine who was an ex-Mormon, and a friend of mine I've known for several years. You'll get to know him as Garth Thomas. So the question is, what is it like to be an LGBTQ member in Lubbock?
In Lubbock. Okay.
Yes.
All right. You just want me to go for it?
Yeah, just go for we can the point is to kind of converse between it and answer some questions, and just it's basically just a little conversational interview.
Okay, cool. Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay. So I mean, I don't think Lubbock is a high conservative area, it's like coming out as queer or being something like that it's kind of a difficult thing to do because of the climate and how everything is in Lubbock. So, and then I grew up in a very, 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 very conservative family. And I grew up with people that criminalize on people that are LGBTQ and plus and everyone in that kind of community and category. And so while I think I kind of knew way, 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 way back that I wasn't straight, it was like something that, you're not allowed to feel. You're not allowed to have it. So you kind of attribute it to other things and you just kind of be like, oh, everybody feels this way. But that's not true. About maybe sophomore year, about that time, and I kind of started growing into myself. And then I had a conversation with a really close friend of mine, and I just kind of really started thinking about my own identity. And I was like, yeah, I'm not straight. And I kind of started to figure it out then. But that's also about the same time that I kind of really started recognizing how funky it was, the place that we were living. Because I mean, it's Lubbock, Texas. The only way you can get more conservative and more homophobic is if you went to Plainview or Post or something like that. I will say that you almost feel like you're constantly having your guard up, you know?
It's this part right here I want to mainly discuss first. It's this idea where you grow up and you become more self-aware of where you're living. You begin to grow this fear around you that I don't know what will happen if I tell anyone else. Will I be abandoned? Will I just lose all my friendships, or even worse? It's an experience that over time you learn it can happen anywhere, which is something I discuss later on with an old coach of mine. But this is something I wanted to lay down first and foremost, is just this fear, because I feel like discussing this first would help other people who are trying to find this video have a better idea of this same feeling. I mean, it's kind of a feeling that maybe can be associated with other people or minorities, but it's just a it's just a fear. I mean, you never know.
Because it's always a question of can I tell this person this, or are they going to think of me different? Especially growing up religious, and I know you grew up religious too.
Oh yeah, so, I did.
Yeah.
But you grew up much more religious.
Yeah. Well, I grew up. Yeah, I grew up in a Mormon family, and as much as the Mormon Church touts around saying that you can be gay or you can be a part of that kind of community, a part of the community, you can't practice it and you're actively taught that no, that's not good. Um, I remember I went in and talked to one of my church leaders whenever I first kind of was figuring myself out. Luckily, this leader was a little bit. I mean, he was he was more on the like side when it came to the church, so
Mm-hmm.
he was cool ish. Um, but I remember it was difficult, and I was scared. And one of the first things he told me is like, or one of the first things he asked was, "Well, have you acted on any of these feelings?" And I was like, I don't know. That's it. Just seems like such an interesting question to ask because like I feel like if you're being supportive of
Mm-hmm.
that kind of situation, you the first thing you're gonna ask is not gonna ask is like, oh, are you practicing? Like, are you actively like dating people of your same gender? Are you actively doing things like that? Because it feels like it fosters such like a feeling of homophobia. And I
Mm-hmm.
feel like that's kind of a sentiment that's shared in Lubbock as a whole, just because unless you go to like certain pockets of the community where it's more accepted than others, but it's
And Garth is right in when mentioning this. Some parts of Lubbock or some pockets of Lubbock are generally more accepting. You can, what parts of that would be Tech Terrace, and Texas Tech. Both of those little areas, right, right neighboring to each other. Um, but it's once you start getting into much more is what he says later on, richer communities out south, Lake Ridge, or the really wealthy areas much further south, that you do experience this form of homophobia, um, which is something that he did experience since he did grow up in Lake Ridge, and even more, like he said, in that Mormon family and belief. Um, cut this, Jacob.
it's a high tension, I guess is what I would say. If I were to sum it up all into like two words. The difference between like Tech Terrace and that area of the city compared to like say you went out to like 114th with all like the rich people,
Oh yeah.
or even just kind of like the old like Lake Ridge. I used to live in Lake Ridge, and that part of the city is like old money, and they're well, I mean they're pretentious. I think that's kind of the best word to say because it's all just homophobic and kind of difficult to be around because people just assume that like you're conservative and homophobic, and since they make that assumption they feel like they can say whatever they want.
We then both discussed what it was comparing, contrasting the certain areas and the experiences to one another. Garth goes on to explain how both cities are basically college towns, but Logan, Utah, is more leftist because of its smaller population and being run by more college kids. He does say though the you still get no matter what you do still get that same experience, um, sadly, of those negative experiences at least of Bible thumpers like claiming you're wrong. What are you doing? You're stupid for doing that or something, or you're gonna burn in hell. We both discussed that and how that's something you can't avoid, and the goal the just in all the only thing you can do is just avoid them and not get yourself into trouble with them. And because sometimes you can find yourselves in situations you can find yourselves in situations where people will become violent, which is it's sad to say, but it does happen. In the end, to summarize, Garth basically talks about how um, he does try to avoid certain issues with people, and specifically the Mormons in his area in Logan, Utah, now that he's moved away. But he also goes on to say some of his good experiences he's had being in Lubbock and being part of the LGBTQ community. Um, he mentions how his experience, I mean, some good, some bad. I mean, but he was able to find people he was able to talk to and had friends to talk to about it. And um, it's that just, it's that ability to through the, strive through the struggles, mainly for him, and for basically anyone, to find a sense of community with other people and feel safe, and feel understood or welcomed. which is more discussed by Pearsall just next. What were like some stereotypes you were expecting when coming into Lubbock?
I mean, I think that when you do your research online, you see that it is supposed to not be very friendly.
Mm-hmm.
That it's a little more rough for people that are LGBTQ. So you think that you have that in the back of your mind when you first arrive, and you're just kind of waiting for that first experience of, oh man, it's really like this. So
Coach Pearsall brings back the same idea that what Garth had on being fearful, on not knowing if you'll be safe or not, and he mentions how he did fear about being in a place like Lubbock, Texas, compared to the other places he'd been that were more accepting, like Colorado, or New York City. I mean, those are very, very different cultures and people and ideals than Lubbock, Texas. So he did have that fear, but he does go on to further explain some other good things that has come out of his experience of living everywhere else, which you will now see quite shortly. From like your experience you've had here, how would that compare or contrast anywhere else you've been?
I mean, the experience that I've had has been the same. Hasn't been negative by any means. So, I don't think that Lubbock you're going to have that anywhere. Right? That experience that you had, you're going to have that on any campus. So, I wouldn't say, chalk that up as a bad thing with tech. It's literally, it's not a Lubbock thing, it's an everywhere thing. It happens, you have it in New York City. So,
it's this part right here that I want to mainly summarize this entire video now. Pearsall and Garth both have said in their own ways that it doesn't depend on where you live or what your situation is with each area. It just depends on how you make of it. Make sense? Because both people have had very, very wildly different experiences growing up, and different opinions on how to handle different things. Garth has a much different opinion than Pearsall on handling other people who may be homophobic or not for the LGBTQ community, and that for him is just avoiding them and not getting in trouble. While for Pearsall, it's the same thing, but maybe a little bit more. Let's try see eye to eye at least. But either way, both of them make a good point that it just depends on how you make of it. There's always going to be the problem of someone possibly making fun of you, or saying that you're wrong, or just making you feel even worse about yourself. But it also depends on how you decide to, like I said, make of the situation. If you decide to just sit there and let people just do whatever or say whatever to you, then that's just all you're going to experience. But if you decide to try taking the effort to find new things or find new communities that welcome you or may help you, then do it. Pearsall has proven that there's places everywhere for LGBTQ members, spent all the way from New York City to little old Lubbock, Texas. And that's the point I want to bring across all right now to summarize this entire video. There is no difference between Lubbock's LGBT community and New York's. The only thing different, it may be a little bit harder to find it since it is a smaller town and a more conservative area. But nonetheless, that's something I want people who watch this to take away. It all depends on just how you decide to make of your situations in life, and I think that's a beautiful and really wise thing to take away from this. Thank you for watching, that's it.